translate, I think we're going to start right away. Because of the technical challenges, we will have a slight change in the agenda where we will start with the presentation of the white paper by Magdalena, and then hopefully afterwards we will continue with the introduction of Pernille Weiss of the water resilience strategy. Yeah. So that for a first remark. More in general, I'd like to open all the participants to this session, this webinar on the water resilience strategy and its implication for Europe's economy and environmental future. I think we've been able to compose a very nice program if everything goes well for the rest of the event. Pernille Weiss will, at a certain moment in time during this event, introduce the water resilience strategy, but we will start with an introduction and a presentation by the white paper of Water Europe on financing and advancing financing of the water sector. Magdalena leads in Water Europe our special expert group on water and finance. In her daily work, she is the first vice president now of the Polish industry chamber, and also, which gives her, I think, special authority to speak on this topic. She is the former Minister of Finance of Poland. Magdalena, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Dirk, and good afternoon to everyone. Let me share my screen. I hope it will work. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
You have
okay.
to, yeah, click on share.
I will try to. Yes. Can you see this in a full screen mode?
No, we don't see it yet in full screen mode.
No. Okay. So please let me do one more thing and once more. And now I will try to do this correctly. Is it working now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you very much. So thank you, Dirk, for introduction of myself, and I will briefly introduce you to our water and finance expert group. So this is one of the strategic groups set under Water Europe to address a fundamental question: how do we finance a resilient, sustainable future for water in Europe? Our group was created in response to a growing recognition that without finance, we can't deliver the innovation, infrastructure, and even we can't deliver on collaboration needed to protect our water resources. We have three main goals. First, we explore innovative finance mechanisms for water-related projects. The second, we try to promote investment, especially in underfunded or high-impact areas. And third, we connect stakeholders from policymakers to financial institutions to businesses, agriculture, so we can unlock change through shared effort. We are focused on practical results-driven solutions, especially in areas like industrial water use, the financing where the financing gap is large and opportunities for innovation are significant. Okay. I will try to change the slide. Sorry for that. Okay. Why this white paper? The context is clear. Across Europe, we face mounting water stress, pollution, and the impacts of climate change. These threats are growing, yet investment in water systems remains fragmented, inconsistent, and often too reactive. The European Commission's new water resilience strategy is a timely and crucial step forward. Our expert group has begun as the strategy was being finalized, and we were fortunate to contribute through participation in Commissioner Roswell's roundtable on financing water resilience. And the questions raised during that roundtable directly inspired this white paper. Our goal is to identify financing and policy solutions to support the water resilience strategy with a focus on mobilizing capital and removing investment barriers. Water smart economy. Let's start from elaborating a bit about this concept that is also mentioned in the water resilience strategy as one of the main goals. Water smart economy is the economic pillar of the water smart society. It is a system that recognizes water as a strategic resource, essential for innovation, productivity, and sustainability, embeds the value of water across the economy in production models, investment strategies, and in public well-being, makes circularity as the norm, recovering and reusing water, energy, and materials across sectors, and uses digital tools to monitor and manage water more intelligently, and creates market incentives to reward efficiency and sustainability. A water smart economy is also resilient. It anticipates and absorbs shocks like droughts, floods, and pollution through adaptive infrastructure, coordinated governance, and cross-sector collaboration. Finance and investments. These are one of the key enablers to achieve a water smart society and economy. Finance is the engine behind this vision, but today the funding gaps are holding us back. Across EU member states, lack of funding is one of the most cited barriers to meeting environmental and water objectives under the EU law. And when we talk about a water smart economy, which goes beyond environmental protection to include industrial productivity, public health, and innovation, the financing needs are even greater. And we need a paradigm shift here. First, from reactive to fixes to strategic and long-term investment. Reactive fixes are not the proper cure for the challenges that we face with water, too much, too little, too polluted. And we need knowledge and data-driven complex strategy, including and engaging all stakeholders. And the second paradigm shift is from fragmented budgeting to holistic financial planning grounded in data and stakeholder engagement. Unlocking financing and addressing investment needs is really key to unlocking the full value of water in Europe, and the full value of water needs to be recognized. This white paper sets out key actions to unlock financing and turn the water resilience strategy into a reality. But this is the beginning of our work, really, but the important one. Let me start with key actions that we identify to address the investment needs related to strengthening our water resilience. And the first one is defining and measuring water resilience. And the first challenge is really a conceptual. What does water resilience mean? Without a clear definition and measurable endpoints, it's difficult to plan, invest, or track progress. Most regions, they lack thresholds, so the point at which water systems can sustain economic and ecological health. And the local data that we need on supply, on demand, and risk, this data is often missing or is inconsistent. This makes resilient planning really a guesswork. It also undermines efforts to link financial materiality with water performance. So we must invest in data systems and in indicators that define and measure resilience at the basin level. Only then can we start aligning finance with meaningful outcomes. The second action is understanding and monetizing water risk. Resilience improves as risk declines, but many organizations don't yet account for water risk properly. Industries face three main types of risks: physical, so these are droughts, floods, pollution; reputational, and regulatory. And these risks are shared because water is a common resource. That means that your resilience depends on your neighbors. Basin level coordination is critical here. We also need to quantify these risks financially. Tools like science-based targets for water help companies align usage with environmental limits, making water risk investment relevant. More investors are using these metrics in decisions, and this is the good sign, but we must continue mainstreaming this. And the third one is recognizing the value of water. Water is a strategic asset, but it is still undervalued in financial decisions. So we must first reflect the true cost of water, and there is a need for a shift towards accounting of water for the purpose of ensuring that the pricing reflects its full economic, social, and environmental value, and that water is managed, allocated, and protected effectively. We must also internalize water risks in financial markets to ensure that investors recognize water scarcity and climate-related water stress as material risks. We need to adopt efficiency standards across industries, agriculture, urban development, and we need to develop water-positive investment frameworks that tie returns to measurable water improvements, such as reduced consumption or ecosystem restoration. And these mechanisms can help incentivize private capital to support the transition. The next one is the issue of integration of water resilience objective into the EU taxonomy and EU reporting. The EU taxonomy currently focuses mainly on climate change, mitigation, and adaptation, but water resilience as an economic activity deserves equal recognition. By including water positive activities like wetland restoration, aquifer research, and reclaimed water use, we can unlock capital through green finance instruments. Without robust, comparable, and widely available data, the financial sector will struggle to support the water transition. Water must be seen not just as a climate issue, but as a pillar of competitiveness, cohesion, and security. Nowadays, water competes for budget with other priorities like defense, like energy transition, and this is also due to the fact that it lacks a dedicated investment roadmap and strategy. But the water resilience strategy, being a flagship policy response to escalating water risks across Europe, this is a historic opportunity for this shift. And the next one, it is about the investment gap analysis for water resilience. We urgently need such a gap analysis across sectors, similar to those for energy and transport. And this analysis should identify where funding shortfalls exist, what are the cost benefits opportunities, and what are the sectoral priorities, especially for agriculture, for urban infrastructure and industrial water systems. It must also include nature-based solutions, reclaimed water, infrastructure upgrades, and digital water systems. Priorities need to be set up. Water also needs to be mainstreamed across several frameworks, like the EU Sustainable Finance Framework. So all the reporting regulations, directives, throughout across the budget, EU budget and investment tools, and also across environmental regulations. It might also be beneficial to embed water resilience in the EU climate and circular economy funding mechanisms and link water resilience investments to the water energy nexus, making them more attractive to climate finance mechanisms. This mainstreaming effort should rest on the development of a quantified EU-wide investment gap analysis for water resilience, akin to investment needs assessments conducted for decarbonization or energy systems. We also need to improve EU funding for water as a key resource. An adequate level of funding within the EU's multi-annual financial framework shall be secured for water that should not compete with other priorities such as defense or economic competitiveness, as it is, water is fundamental to both security, including defense, and economic resilience. And it would be optimal to create a dedicated water transition fund to accelerate the deployment of innovative water smart technologies and optimize water infrastructure to address current and future challenges. This is the request for the future multi-annual financial framework that is being discussed and prepared. So it is very important to think about this aspect. It is important also to increase transparency of financial opportunities and enabling key stakeholders such as farmers, industrial actors, investors, property developers, and local and regional authorities to better mobilize public-private partnerships. Water infrastructure is essential, as I said, for security and for resilience. Recognizing water as infrastructure that is critical for security and resilience, and ensuring the continuity of supply and operation for society, agriculture, and for industry, this would also mean prioritization of investments. It would be good also to strengthen water resilience in corporate and public finance. To do this, we propose requiring water-related disclosures in corporate reporting, like CapEx, water risk exposure, creating tax incentives and public-private partnerships models for water-efficient investments, and promoting collaboration. This is really crucial between utilities, tech providers, industries to co-develop smart solutions. And public-private cooperation for water smart solutions should be supported. Another very important aspect, enhancing project preparation support. Project size and preparation are really the major barriers for investment, attracting investment in water. So we recommend to expand technical assistance at the regional and municipal level. We propose also and recommend to use European Investment Bank and EBRD platforms to aggregate smaller projects into the investable pipelines, supporting blended finance approaches, especially for innovation and high impact projects. And because private investors, what they need also is they need clarity, they need scale, they need de-risking mechanisms. Let's also promote blue finance, blue bonds, water-linked loans to attract sustainability capital to the sector. after the next block after the key actions that we have identified, this is a bit about how to promote private investment in water infrastructure, because private capital is really essential. Only with EU funding and budgetary money, we will not be able to complete all the tasks that are needed and to cover the gap. So private capital, as I said, is essential. But right now, water infrastructure is not seen as an attractive investment. And why is it? Because projects are often too small, too fragmented, and perceived also as high risks. So how do we change this? First, by standardization and bundling. We must standardize project design and documentation and bundle smaller initiatives into larger investment vehicles, project pipelines. This makes projects more predictable, scalable, and appealing to investors. The second issue is it's the role of the development banks. So institutions like the EIB and EBRD, they have a critical role here. As I already mentioned, they offer climate adaptation envelopes under the EIB climate priorities. They provide equity, venture capital, and concessional finance to scale innovation. They anchor green and blue financial instruments like water-themed bonds or pooled investment vehicles. They also support cross-border investments aligned with water, energy, and climate goals. There is an issue of legal and financial incentives. It would be good to expand the state aid exemptions to enable public-private partnerships, especially in shared infrastructure, for instance, for water reuse in industrial clusters. Use pricing reforms to reflect the true cost, the true value of water. And update the EU Green Bond Standard to explicitly include water-related projects, for instance, desalination powered by renewables, aquifer recharge, or industrial water recycling. Disclose and signal through reporting. So use the reporting regulation to mandate disclosure of water-related CapEx, report on water efficiency targets, and signal investment risks and opportunities for sustainable water use. Blended finance, blue bonds, very important. Apply EU funds to de-risk high-impact projects via guarantees, subordinated debt, or equity. Promote blue bonds and blue loans under robust EU frameworks. This focus directly on water ecosystems and should receive marketing and also policy support. Explore innovative financial models. So encourage the models that connect water and energy, like water ESCOs, performance-based water services with the cost benefits, impact investing tied to water outcomes, and public-private models. This is really important, with co-financing and with shared benefits. What is also crucial is to find a way to unlock financing for new technology upscaling. Innovation in water tech is vibrant, but many promising solutions, they never reach scale. And why is that? Usually because of the so-called valley of death. So this is the gap between research and development and commercial deployment. And we need to fix this. So we can do this by supporting technology readiness levels 6 to 9. So by aligning Horizon Europe, the Innovation Fund, and InvestEU to fund water technologies as they move from pilots to market. So this is this TRL 6 to 9. And we propose a dedicated inter-program coordination body under the Water Resilience Strategy to align priorities and funding cycles. The next a very important issue is to recognize water technologies as strategic ones. The Net Zero Industry Act must or shall include water technologies as strategic, and these are critical for decarbonization, for circular economy goals, and for resilience. And this designation would accelerate permitting, enable preferential procurement, and unlock investment incentives. This is crucial also to create a stable demand via regulation. So to use demand side drivers through that are under the updated Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, for instance, in water use reuse regulation, but also in other EU laws, and that create predictable demand for water tech. And of course, this will also encourage the private investment. And we need to scale via procurement and blended finance. So it would be good to launch EU-wide innovation procurement programs, combine grants and equity through blended finance tools like EIB or like Life EIB Venture Debt or InvestEU, and encourage co-investment by public institutions and venture capital private equity funds to commercialize breakthrough technologies. Make municipalities early adopters, because public infrastructure, especially municipal utilities, wastewater treatment plants, they should pilot emerging technologies. We recommend innovation adoption targets in public investment plans, incentives for being at test beds, and support for public-private partnerships with startups and SMEs. It is worth to promote water as a service models. So enable these models where users pay for treated water, not for infrastructure. And this reduces CapEx burdens, support decentralized systems, attracts private investors, operators and investors. And very important, support SMEs. Small firms, they drive much of Europe's water innovation. So we need to offer patient capital, revenue-based finance, first loss equity. We need to connect them to cross-border pilots, and we need to ensure visibility via public procurement and allocate a share of EIB and EU climate funding specifically to water SMEs. If we want a water smart and resilient Europe, we need to turn policy ambition into concrete, investable action. And here is our call to action. So first, elevate water resilience in the EU and national policy. Water must be recognized as critical to economic, environmental, and security resilience, and be fully embedded in the climate and circular economy strategies, competitiveness frameworks, and strategic investment planning. Conduct a robust EU-wide investment gap analysis. We need a clear picture of how much is needed, where the gaps are, and what sectors and technologies must be prioritized. And this is essential for both budget planning and private sector mobilization. Strengthen project preparation and technical assistance. Local authorities and small utilities, they lack resources to develop bankable projects. And we need to expand technical assistance programs, build project pipelines, support aggregation, and create a shared toolbox for feasibility studies and risk modeling. We need to foster stakeholder collaboration and awareness. We often hear that the money is there, but so why? Why isn't it being used? And the answer lies in the gaps in governance, the regulatory uncertainty, and the lack of coordinated local engagement. So let's build capacity, trust, and awareness so water projects can compete effectively for investment. Develop standardized metrics for impact and investment. So investors, they need clarity. What counts as a water resilient project? How do we track impact? We need EU-endorsed standards for water impact the same way we have for energy efficiency or carbon savings. Water resilience is both. It is a strategic necessity and it is a moral obligation. And the time to act is now, boldly, collaboratively, and with confidence. So let's build a future Europe where Europe leads in water smart investment, innovation, and resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. So unfortunately, the technical issues that we have with I would say, the cabinet persist, so we have to improvise a little bit. So we will soon continue directly with the panel discussion. But before we go there, I'd like to see if there are any questions to Magdalena. If you have a question, please raise your digital hand and I will see if I can give you the word. Any questions? I don't see any. Is there a country that we can model after?
I'm not sure if I understand.
Well, is there a country that can serve as an example on how to deal with water and finance?
Okay. So I think, of course, we can think about the examples or the role models. And my first thought goes to the Netherlands or to Spain. But I think that with water is local. Water is local, and I think that there is, even in finance, there is no one size fits all, because there are different needs, and the money is not a first thing to think about. The first, you need a strategy, what you have to do, what you need to invest in to secure your supply and demand side of water in a water resilient and water smart way. So I think that as a group, as a water and finance group, we need to see throughout many EU countries and throughout the models that has proven to be like successful ones, and to see if they can be adjusted to other countries. But of course, the main let's say the main idea for water, because water is has this issue with bankability. Yes, the water investment usually is very difficult to see the benefits, the return on investment in water, or it needs patience. So definitely the way forward is to use, as I mentioned, the EU funds throughout EIB, the best way, or EU funding as a vehicle to de-risk and to attract also private capital in a way of blended finance. So this will be a general model, also private-public partnerships, but it will also depend a bit of a regulation in each member state and the culture. But definitely, if you would ask me what I would like to promote, I think the good way forward would be to try and to find as much of opportunities of collaboration with the development banks like EIB or the EBRD or national development banks, so the more EU or budgetary or finance, together with the private capital throughout public private partnerships or other models that would allow us to identify the possible returns on investment.
Okay, good. And I have a few other questions. Actually, Maria had a follow-up question, but I will first see a little bit with the other people who are sending questions. Let me see. I see Tom has raised his hand. Let me see. Voila. Tom, can you unmute?
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, Magdalena. In the UK, we're about to move into a very, very large investment. It's about 104 billion in the next cycle in water and related infrastructure. But on the other hand, long-term planning is frustrated by the political cycle, which is 5 years-ish, and also the regulatory cycle, which is also about 5 years. Have you got any thoughts about finding ways of genuinely having longer term perspectives on finance and strategy planning?
This is a difficult question because
Sorry.
finance is a tool. It's not a policy driver. Of course,
Sure.
it can be quite a powerful measure and powerful tool, but still it is a tool. So it needs to follow the priorities which are set up in the regulation or in the policy. And you are perfectly right that even if, of course, UK is for now not using EU funds, but even in when we speak about the EU funds, there is also a short perspective, like 4 or 5 years for the financial perspective, and it's difficult for water investment, especially infrastructure, to deliver results, to properly use this money. And this is for the public money, it might be an issue, as you mentioned, the policy cycle. So from election to election, and water might not be seen as a priority after the policy cycle ends. But I think it is important to build awareness. Yes, and I believe that water resilience strategy is a very good step forward. And while we deliver, and the European Commission and we all, because water is about collaboration, because it is local, it is so it is about collaboration. It has many stakeholders, so many users. So when we deliver on the actions provided in the water resilience strategy, I think we need to think about the bottlenecks that you have mentioned, that it needs a longer perspective, that it needs a stable strategy, that it needs also a stable investment plan. Because if we want to attract more private capital, of course, private capital is looking for the return on investment, and it looks also on the risk side. So the risking is also important here. So the long investment plans are crucial.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pernille. Then we have a question by Dirk Hallet, who says that you mentioned that investments in water are often perceived as high risk. Could you elaborate a bit on why that is the case, and how does this perception compare to the way energy investments are typically assessed?
It is very quite a technical question, but I will try to elaborate about this risk. The risk is mostly on that there is a bankability issue. So there is not so obvious how to materialize, how to economically like deliver on the assessment of how much money and how much cash flow and how much return you can get out of the water investment, especially the water utilities, infrastructure. These are investments that have a long time period to realize these investments, and because of the value of water, so the pricing policy, all the issues connected with the return on this investment, this makes the water quite risky. Of course, it will be different for the industry and industrial water, because in this case, when we would like to ask big companies to invest in water, there will be rather an issue about how they perceive water. Is the water an important risk they need to manage for their further activities or not? And quite often when we talk, and I talk to the companies in Poland, for instance, they don't see water as a crucial and a priority number one. Of course, energy is number one, but the water, even though it is connected to energy quite often, it's not seen as a risk for their further activity or even development. So I think we need to discuss more about the water and the role of the water as an asset and because as an energy. Water is also very important for your production, for your functioning, and for your life, even more important than energy, because without energy, I think we can live as people, as society, but without water, it's not possible. So and the energy and the energy patterns and the solutions that are for the energy and for the investment in energy could be a bit of a benchmark for water, but importance is to understand that water is also a risk. Water cannot be produced, energy can be produced. Of course, energy is much more expensive, and the question is why water is so cheap if it is so precious to us.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. I see a new question, which I'm not sure you can answer well, but let's see. Otherwise, I'll try to give a go at it. But how will this white paper have any impact on the EU regulations on corporate water sustainability?
We will see. You know, the white paper has been published on the 2nd of June. So let's see, because it's not so much time, not so long ago. So this white paper, of course, was broadly distributed by Water Europe to the Commission and to the member states, and let's see. Of course, there is the direction that Commission follows right now is deregulation. And hopefully simplification. And it means also, it is also about the omnibus packages, so the reporting obligations and so on. But the issue with water is a bit more, I think, complicated, because for decarbonization, for the energy investment, and the narrative is already there, and the pattern, the way to follow is already there. But for water, as I said, water disclosure focuses mainly on the climate adaptation, the climate environmental aspects, not on these economic aspects. And what we see in water is, of course, to make reporting simple, but not to lose the opportunity throughout the data disclosure, the reporting, to build a better, positive, investment positive narrative for water, but also in this economic aspect. I don't know if this answers the question.
I think you gave a very good go at that, Magdalena. Perhaps I can add on that. Now, of course, we've seen that in the water resilience strategy, one of the key pillars is the achievement of a EU water smart economy, which is of course a concept which is directly linked and comes from our vision on building a water smart society. In that sense, the water smart economy is also, I think, very nicely defined in the white paper. And of course, we will be closely working on base of the blueprint that has been laid out in this white paper, in which we have, I would say, very many European-wide renowned experts involved in the drafting, yeah, to engage with the key actors in the European institutions at the level of the different cabinets, the DGs, but also the European Parliament, member states, to communicate this on how we see that a water smart economy should be realized and can be realized, particularly over the next few years. In that sense, and it links perhaps also very closely to a recent study that we did as Water Europe on the socio-economic importance of the value of the EU investing in water. By the way, all these publications, both the white paper and that study, are available on the website of Water Europe. So if you go there, you can download it. I also included the link already in the chat box. But Magdalena, before we conclude this session and we continue to the panel discussion, perhaps you can briefly still comment on the work the expert group is doing, because you've now, the last few months, you've dedicated very much to producing this white paper. You've also already produced, which we're going to launch this week, a very nice position paper on the importance of water and the omnibus legislation on sustainability. but what is next in the pipeline?
Thank you very much. Yes, as I mentioned, we want to be practical with our water and finance expert group. So we will definitely want to hear also from other expert groups of Water Europe about their business cases for financing, yes, for investment. And so we will start with the water and agri-food expert group, and the leader will share with us several business cases that are looking for the good financing models. So I think this will be our way forward. So we would like to see also what are the successful cases for financing and to build on that, but also to see what are the needs, what are the ideas, because for finance you need to have a business case well defined, and then you can try to find a good model that will suit the purpose. So this is what we want to do further on. Of course, we will also closely look what is going around the water resilience strategy, because the publication of the strategy is only a beginning, and we know that one of the enabling areas is financing and investment. And definitely, as we were closely cooperating and hearing what the Commission is asking while preparing the water resilience strategy, and that's how the white paper was delivered. We will be also hearing what is coming from the Commission and what is really needed to accelerate and to enhance this financing and investment enabler for the water resilience strategy.
Well, thank you very much, Magdalena. And I would say from my side, a big digital applause for all the work you and the members of the expert group have been doing, and also for the excellent presentation in which you just shared with us the content of this very nice white paper. So with that, we're going to continue with our panel discussion. So I would like my panelists, Jeff Townsend, Felix Meijer-Horn, Nick Post, and Bernardo Matos, to open their camera. Everybody else close their camera so we can clearly see who's talking. And then we're going to start with the panel discussion, which I think during this panel discussion, we will bring different voices from the water sector, from Bentley, from Ertsen, from Hydroloop and Ecolab together to exactly discuss how we can implement this strategy and its solutions to build a European water smart society and economy. Let me see, do I have, yes, I have my panel. No, Jeff, I don't see you yet.
Yeah, so my camera's not working. Apologies for that, not that you're missing anything.
We seem to have
it's on strike,
well,
like the Dutch Railways today, so apologies.
Yes, okay. We seem to have a day with all kind of glitches, so but doesn't matter. We start. Okay, so I'm very pleased to have my my panelists here. So I'm happy to introduce Jeff Townsend, who's industry fellow from Ecolab and chairs the Water Europe Industry Community of Practice. Then we have Felix Meijer-Horn, who is President Corporate Affairs at Ertsen and chair of the Water Europe Expert Group on Resource Recovery. We have Bernardo Matos, who is Senior Director EU Government Relationships at Bentley and member of the Water Europe Policy Advisory Committee. And we have Nick Post, who is Water Specialist and Regulation at Hydroloop, and who is also member of the Water Europe Policy Advisory Committee. Perhaps each of you may briefly want to comment the specificities of the different companies you represent and how that links to the water resilience strategy. Jeff, you want to kick off?
Yeah, so we very much welcome the water resilience strategy. It's a very valuable foundation and platform. I think if one looks at the actions that are contained at the end of the document, you see there's a lot of scope for future development. which we look forward to engaging in. But it's very comprehensive. It touches on the really important areas of governance, investments. We just had an excellent presentation on that. The vital role of data and digitalization and all the capabilities that are now before us, the very important role of research and innovation and such like. And all of these have a strong bearing on industrial water use. And we see tremendous opportunities, particularly for the reuse of water and the way we integrate with energy and such like. So very much welcome. And we see this as very much the start of a new journey, and we certainly want to participate in the development over the coming months and years. Thank you.
Very good. Felix, how does Edson consider the water resilience strategy?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dirk, and for welcoming me today here. I'm President of Corporate Affairs. Edson, for those that don't know the company, we invented 160 years ago the blower technology, expanding into turbo machines. You need all this in the wastewater treatment for oxygen transfer. We see a huge opportunity here to participate in solving a number of problems and to bring a new dimension really for everyone. Water is energy, energy is resources. If you take those three components together and bring in some optimization, and we have done a number of examples where we can certainly say, in the short run, we can reduce the energy costs of a wastewater treatment plant by 50 or 60%, just by changing the aeration, adapt certain other measures. You already have what was mentioned earlier on by Magdalena, the financial issues. So by saving or bringing efficiency into the whole installation, you will have finance available. But it also goes, into the more specific area of recovering resources such as phosphor, nitrates, ammonia, where we have a huge gap. Germany is sort of in a more advanced stage, but thank God the law is changing, and we will obviously have to look after this. It means also we can become self-sufficient for phosphor, for instance, that we rely on importing from Russia and Morocco for more than 60 or 70%. So very happy to be here today and to share more of those interesting components with the other colleagues.
Thank you very much, Felix. Then we continue with Nick. Nick, what is the link between the business of Hydroloop and the water resilience strategy?
Thank you, Dirk. Yes, we as Hydroloop make grey water recycling systems, and they are in property grey water recycling systems. So highly decentralized, not at the beginning, not at the end, but right in the middle, right between the water supply and the building drainage. So reducing both the water supply by reusing the water again, which is drinking water, not just normal water, but drinking water where a lot of energy has already put into it to make it that high quality drinking water. We enable to reuse that, and then also saving on drainage water. So thickening the drainage water stream towards the wastewater recycling plants, making them also more efficient, and reducing the pressure on the urbanization of wastewater treatment plants. We are one of those companies, those SMEs that are in the valley of death currently. So this strategy is immensely important for us. It sets out the value of water, which is not represented in the cost of water, and it helps companies like ours, innovative companies who have in-property systems, who don't have a good return on investment because the cost of water is low, which is good because it's the essence of life, but it makes it hard for a business case. So with the water resilience strategy, it enables us to use the strategy where efficient design and reuse is the primary objective, and increasing supply, which most member states refer to, making that a last resort. So it enables us to make a business case for companies and for buildings to integrate reuse of water.
Excellent. And all of that, of course, with the purpose to address the water challenges.
Primarily, absolutely.
Yeah. Very good. And then last but not least, Bernardo.
Thank you, Dirk, and thank you to Water Europe for the invitation. So just a couple of words about Bentley Systems, as I think some participants will not be familiar with us. We are a global infrastructure engineering software company. So we develop software solutions for the design, construction, and operation of all types of infrastructure, from transportation to energy and also water. And in the water space, we are very active. Our solutions are used, for instance, to design, build, operate large wastewater treatment plants, to optimize drinking water networks, to improve flood resilience in an urban context, and also, for instance, to get a better understanding of the subsurface. So, for instance, groundwater mapping and things of that nature. At the moment, as a company, we are very focused on the concept of open, interoperable infrastructure digital twins, meaning federating different types of data from different sources in different formats, and then using techniques like AI and other techniques to extract insights leading to better decisions for infrastructure and water infrastructure in particular. So as you can imagine, we think about and I think about digitalization all day, every day, and we have some strong views as to how digitalization can help achieve some of these objectives. Looking at the water resilience strategy as a first maybe comment, I think the water resilience strategy from that perspective is extremely positive, because it is clearly a forward-looking document that looks at digitalization as a tool that can help the EU achieve its objectives in this regard. And really, I think at least in the water space, that is a first. I think it is a landmark moment. And so the European Commission, DG Environment, they really deserve congratulations on that front. Ultimately, to summarize, I think if we want to implement the EU Water Acquis at national level in the way it needs to be implemented, and at the speed at which it needs to be implemented, this critically depends on the ability to gather, analyze, and share trustworthy data at scale. And so if we want to treat water as a strategic, scarce resource, if we want to implement a water efficiency first principle across the EU economy, we need to do it on the basis of reliable, comparable data. And so on that front, I think the water resilience strategy sets a very good basis to work from. So we have a very positive view on the document.
Very clear. Thank you very much, Bernardo. Very good. Okay, then we continue with the discussion, and then I go back to Jeff. Jeff, the water resilience strategy introduces the principle of water efficiency first. Now, with the upcoming guidance to help member states integrate this across domestic, agricultural, and industrial water uses. So from your industrial perspective, how do you assess the significance of this principle? And is it a useful leverage for change?
Yeah, so in summary, yes, I think it's very helpful. And given the potential complexity of water as a resource, the water efficiency first framework is valuable, as it sets out the guiding principles for decision-making and investments based on clear prioritization in the way water demand and supply are managed. So in this regard, it offers a structured and systematic approach to water resource management across all sectors. And when you follow the principles, of course, the priority is dealing with over abstraction, and that's directly tied to the threshold of resilience. So it's very much within the concept of resilient freshwater systems. Then to enhance water efficiency, and in the water resilience strategy, there's an EU-wide target of a minimum of 10% reduction by 2030, encouraging member states to set their own targets. We believe that's very doable. It's almost a housekeeping exercise, 10%. We recognize that in many places, that requirement would be greater, 40, 50, 60% in some locations, but nonetheless very, very welcome. And on reuse of water, this is an absolutely essential component of the strategy. Industrial wastewater reuse is a huge opportunity. We're estimating around 5 to 7% of reuse at present. There's a 25 billion meter cube resource of wastewater, industrial wastewater across Europe. Has its challenges on variability, qualities and such like, but we really need to double down on it. And just last couple of comments. One is that, the water efficiency first principle is clearly inspired by the energy first principle. And in many respects, the water efficiency and energy efficiency first principles need to be understood in a very integrated way. And this is because water and energy are strongly linked in industry. Somewhere between 35 and 75% of total site energy is transferred through water. When that energy is being transferred, it's normally at the heart of production, when water has its greatest economic value linked to productivity. So it becomes very, very important to grasp that. And then the second caveat, and probably a little bit more controversial, is that yes, we must have a good structure like the water efficiency first framework, but water is such a powerful growth enabler that is not always about less is best. We need to understand how best to put water to work for the economy, and where we have stable, resilient, freshwater systems, we need to be exploring on how water enables growth, profitability, competitiveness, while simultaneously improving the well-being of communities and the environment. So as a structure, very, very valuable. It's certainly a key component of building a water smart economy, supporting competitors and attracting investors. But there are a couple of caveats that need to be better understood.
Thank you very much. And then the last point, of course, that I would say less is not always better. Also has to do very much, I think, with the local nature of water.
That's right. And I think very much so. And we heard a few minutes ago, Bernardo commenting about the visualization, the insights that we need. And we really need to undertake water resilience mapping at that local level, because that will dictate whether we are sort of below the threshold of resilience, where the focus really is on risk mitigation, and trying to get sustainable business operations and agriculture, and et cetera. But if you have plentiful water and you're above that resilience threshold, then it's right to understand the extent to which that can be used for greater growth. And there's no question that that water is that very, very powerful growth enabler. So we don't want to restrict its use where it's in plentiful supply. So yeah, absolutely, very much a local resource perspective.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. And then I will turn my attention to Nick. Nick, I think the strategy sets out ambitious goals to reduce water abstraction and promote reuse. Jeff already touched upon the importance of reuse, but from your perspective, what barriers still exist to scaling water reuse in households and buildings, and how can regulation better enable decentralized solutions like those, by the way, of Hydroloop, and which initiatives in the water resilience strategy can have most of the impact?
Yes, the barriers. One of the biggest barrier currently is what has been mentioned before, that the value of water is not represented in the cost of water. The cost of water is fairly low. When I talk about water in our sector, it's in building drinking water. So it's not the main river flows, it's drinking water. So high quality potable water. So the cost of water is very low, whereas the value of water for the value of life is very high. It's a good thing that the cost is so low. You want as many people against the least amount of money to access clean, safe water across the European Union, because you want that to be an available resource, and not only for the wealthy population. So that's a good thing, but it also intrinsically holds back investors of investing in water reuse or water saving installations. So that's one of the barriers. Now, how could you alleviate that barrier or take away that barrier? One way would be to include the results from the water resilience strategy into the EU taxonomy. So the EU taxonomy is the classification system for sustainable economic activities. So if you include the results, make sure you have an efficient design, include reuse into your design, make that quantifiable. Not every measure has the same effect. Make that quantifiable and include that into the EU taxonomy. That way, investors who comply with the EU taxonomy and inherently with the water resilience strategy can use that to get more favorable conditions on their finance strategies. So that could be a way to enhance that.
Very good. Yeah, it's a strange contradiction. On one hand, the cost very low and the value very high. I think it's yeah.
Yes, and also what we see is that the cost often goes to the building owner. So you install a system, the cost of installing water efficient is may it be an efficient shower head, may it be a reuse installation, may it be a water harvesting, so rainwater harvesting and usable application, that goes to the building owner. But the benefits often go for the drinking water company who supplies the water or the wastewater treatment facility who has to clean less water. So there's an unbalance there.
Yeah, clearly that needs to be addressed. Well, thank you, Nick. So then, Bernardo, now the strategy proposes an EU-wide plan for digitalization in the water sector. What are your expectations for the plan? Do you agree with the two blocks that are mentioned by the EU Commission? And what features must it include to be effective for infrastructure operations? And do you think that this action plan can actually facilitate the deployment of tools such as digital twins?
Yes. So I think the short answer is yes. But let me first preface what I'm about to say. So when we talk about digital twins in this space, I think it's very important to explain that we're not talking about the bells and whistles of technology. We're not talking about pretty 3D models. When we talk about digitalization in this space, we're talking about a methodology. It's a way of working, of collaborating, of solving problems, and a way of structuring data in such a way that you can effectively, in practice, ask questions to the data and get answers. For instance, simulate different scenarios, understand what the outcomes of your options will be, and then take your final decision accordingly. So it's not about going from pen and paper to PDFs and then losing your mind trying to extract data from PDFs. And this seems obvious, but I think it's important to start there. So with that in mind, what are my expectations for the action plan? So the action plan, when it comes to digitalization, sets out these two blocks. And I wondered if I should read them because they're quite long, but I'll just quickly go through them. So first, deployment of digital solutions through funding and knowledge sharing to build up digital skills and encourage technology transfer in the water sector. So a lot there. And second, to support water data sharing by fostering the development of national data portals to overcome fragmentation and make data accessible, interoperable, etc. I mean, in short, I think these are very good work streams to start. I would say if I were to look at all of these and prioritize one single thing, I think it would be very important for the action plan to really foster adoption of digital technologies that already exist, that are already mature, and to foster their adoption across the entire water cycle. Why do I put the emphasis there? I put the emphasis there because I think one of the biggest obstacles to the digitalization of the water ecosystem at large is structural in nature and has to do with how fragmented the water ecosystem at large is at EU level. If we look at all the various stakeholders that intervene in the water cycle in the 27 member states, we see different pictures in different countries, right? I mean, in some countries you have entities of a public nature doing certain tasks that in some other countries are done by private entities or a mix of public and private. Some entities, and I'm using the word entities in general terms on purpose, in some countries, entities dealing with water have responsibilities at local level, regional level, national level, etc. And even how they report on certain issues like water losses is done differently from member state to member state. Now, I'm saying this not because we need to streamline things across the member states. That's not doable or desirable, but it does pose a huge challenge when it comes to digitalization and making sure that we generate data in a way that is consistent across the whole EU. So with all this in mind, looking at the action plan that the Commission and other stakeholders will work on, I think it's very important for the European Commission and this action plan to really offer that guidance, the North Star that will allow the EU 27 to move in the same direction when it comes to digitalization. For instance, what type of data should we be gathering? What do we want that data to look like? What are the key objectives that we want to achieve via this data, the data that we gather? And frankly, if we look at the Water Acquis, I think we already know what these objectives are. I mean, if we look at the Drinking Water Directive, focus on leakages, if we look at the revised Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, energy efficiency of wastewater treatment plants, resilience of stormwater infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it would be very helpful for us to really compile this in a simple list that will offer guidance to the various actors in the water ecosystem. And then the question is, how do we foster adoption? And there I have some ideas as well, but I'll leave that maybe for us to discuss later on.
Very good. So if I listen well to you, what is very important is that, I mean, you mentioned the fragmentation of the water ecosystem, yeah? Of course, across the different uses, across, I would say, the different sectors. And then one of the challenges, if I understand you well, is not only, I would say, is having the right data at the right moment in time with the right confidence of the actors to build on that. Right? Good. Then I want to quickly make the bridge to Jeff, because Jeff, I think that is also a topic which is, I would say, very close to your heart. You want to give any comments on that before I ask you your next question?
Yeah, absolutely. So inherent in the confidence to invest is reliable data. And that's really tricky for water because we really need near-time understanding at the local level, and that requires supply, demand, and so forth. But what we see is that as we try and understand supply and demand characteristics and the environmental flows that sit at the heart of that, and of course you can connect that directly to how resilient a catchment is, then there are the frameworks now that are emerging and are very, very helpful to really put numbers against those and targets. And we see that as a very important step in this confidence to invest. And of course, we can divide Europe into catchments, aquifers. We can have a very firm grip on how much water is entering via meteorological data. Increasingly, we see a lot of insights on demand. From satellite imagery, looking at evapotranspiration, for example, more reporting and so forth. So I think in very much along the lines that you just outlined, we should pursue this rigorously because it does deal with one of the major barriers to invest.
Very good, thank you. And then we pass on to your real question, which is, now despite the EU sustainable finance framework, and tools like the taxonomy and the CSRD, we still see a gap in channeling private investment into water smart industrial upgrades. Now, in your view, what is still missing in the current policy mix to fully mobilize industry?
Thank you, Dirk. So very much along the lines of the comments from a few moments ago, there's this kind of lack of confidence to invest, and it's multifaceted and it's complex. And I've made it my kind of purpose to really understand it with a lot of large industrial users across Europe, different locations, different contexts, to make sure we really get to the heart of the why. And basically, what we see are large water users in quite vulnerable locations who are very much aware of a need to address their water security concerns and build a resilient operation, which often will take substantial investment, and yet they're not taking those decisions. And there are two fundamental reasons why. First reason is uncertainty on what to target. Do we target 10%, 20%, 40%, 60%? Of course, there's really significant differences between 20 and say 40% as a target. These things aren't linear. And of course, a lot of large organizations want to avoid many incremental investments because the sum of those can be much greater than one single deployment. So that's the first challenge, is what should we target that's truly meaningful and will make a difference to our risk profile. The second area is that even if they make a substantial investment, they cannot necessarily guarantee the risk reduction. It's not in their direct control. And that's because as water becomes more scarce, the risks and the opportunities businesses face shift very rapidly from being internal to external to an operation. So an individual company can make a major investment and not see the risk profile move at all. Right. And of course, we quickly recognize the extent to which water is then a shared resource. So it's tied to targeting, because if we had confidence in targeting, and we made sure that all that target, which is relevant for all stakeholders at the particular location, was disseminated among all of those stakeholders, and say, this is our ambition over the next 2 to 5 years to achieve this level of reduction, then we would tend to see, well, from all the feedback we're getting, then we would see a very good alignment to that and coalescence around that target and make it meaningful. So in essence, what we see is that meaningful risk reduction is only as strong as the collective resolve to achieve it. And of course, then collaboration becomes a limiting factor for effective governance. And then the solution is very much along the lines of a few moments ago, I won't repeat, is to have really good, solid, robust catchment level data on supply and demand that we highlighted, turn that into a target reflecting resilience, environmental flows, the things that really matter when we look at the ecosystems of freshwater systems, to provide that data in a very apolitical way. So there's not any allocation elements, which are obviously very political and such like, but it is the raw data from which one can distill a target and a plan. And all the feedback we're getting so far suggests that would be a very strong way forward.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much, Jeff. And then I'm going to turn to Felix and see with Felix, I mean, do you think that the water energy nexus is well included in the strategy? And do you think that the European Commission should have strengthened the synergies with the net zero agenda for industry?
Well, thank you. Your question points to a critical and timely issue, of course. And if I may break this down in those two parts here. First, is the energy nexus well included in the EU strategy? I would say yes, partially, but not comprehensively. And the good news is that the European Commission recognizes the water energy nexus in various policy documents. There are three that stand out. One is the Green Deal, the Water Framework Directive, and the Energy Efficiency Directive. Of course, it's not really mainstreamed across all sectoral strategies, and that's where work needs to be done. There needs to be a bridge between the institutions and the industry, and possibly Water Europe, of course. Now, the strength of this, at least this energy nexus, is that you will see for instance, in Horizon funds, Horizon Europe projects that explore the energy recovery, for instance, of wastewater or water efficiency. energy systems. You have the industrial emission directive. That is very good. On the other side, there's a gap, or some of the gaps I would see is there's no unified EU framework. So that tackles the water energy nexus as a system, a principal issue there. That needs to be sorted, and the integration is weaker at an implementation level, because you have obviously different member states where different water and energy policies apply, and some operate in let's call it a silo. Yeah. And when you look at the second part of your question, should the European Commission strengthen energy with net zero agenda? Yes, I would say here significantly. If the EU wants to achieve net zero industry goals, water needs to be integrated because it is part of the decarbonization strategy. Why is that? Well, take industrial carbonization depends on water. So you've got green hydrogen, carbon capture and cooling in electrical processes. Your study, Dirk, has already pointed out to the significant water and energy increases we will face just because of that. And then obviously at the same time, yes, it's nice, but aren't we missing some opportunities here? It's nice to scale it up, but the resource dependencies like water depend so much. So you increase the water consumption because of some new technologies require it, and at the same time you're fighting against trying to be as efficient as possible with water. So it definitely could become what I would say competitive edge for Europe. When we look at the drought-prone regions now, summer is coming fast, so we're going to find again some. So what the EU could do is, I think, include water risk assessment in the net zero industrial planning. That needs to be done. Fund more water efficient and clean tech through their innovation funds, and encourage industrial symbiosis using treated water, for instance, in a variety of industries or even in hydrogen. So in summary, I would say the European Commission has laid some significant groundwork, but it needs to really operationalize the water energy nexus within its net zero industrial strategies. That having said, I believe that will help and ensure resource security, resilience, and real-world feasibility of decarbonization. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, I think it's also a very important point what you said there about the competitive edge, because what we see now, of course, especially with process industry, that increasingly in Europe they're suffering under the high energy prices, which are much lower in China and in the US. Yeah. But if you look at energy, of course, energy, if you don't have it, you can make it. Water, if you don't have it, you can't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're in Europe in a position where we generally, and if we manage right with the right policy, we can have enough water presence, but then we need to make sure we manage it well with the right policies.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important point. Thank you for bringing that in. Good. Then Bernardo, I'm coming back to you because already during your previous answer, I was thinking here is an important point because, of course, we have the hardware, we have the software, we have the data, but do we have the people with the right skills to deal with them? So my question to you is, how do you assess the current bottlenecks in aligning digital and infrastructure investment planning, and what can the EU do better there? But particularly, does investment in skills, does it also need to be strengthened? And how do we do that? Is it, and not only academic skills, but I would say really the people who stand on the work floor?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I'll maybe leave that one to the end. I mean, I think when I think of bottlenecks to digitalization, again, of the water ecosystem at large, I think of, and it's hard to generalize, but I think of three main bottlenecks. One is the one I alluded to earlier, fragmentation, where again the EU can play a really key role to help guide the sector in the right direction. I think a second bottleneck, and this was explained by Magdalena earlier much better than I ever could, is financial constraints. In Europe, if we think about digitalization and water utilities, for instance, some water utilities are already at the cutting edge of technology, but many others aren't. And in many cases they aren't, not because of a lack of wanting, but because they are already operating at full capacity. And so that becomes an issue to adopting these technologies and moving forward on that front. So when it comes to financial constraints, I think we really need to create the right incentives for the sector to modernize and adopt these types of solutions at scale. And EU funding plays a role there. I think we've seen very positive signs in the midterm review of the cohesion policy, where water resilience has now been elevated as a strategic priority. And in that bucket, if you will, digitalization of water infrastructure is explicitly included, meaning you can get up to 100% EU funding for water resilience projects and up to 30% pre-financing for these projects. So these are very beneficial conditions. I think it's a very good, inspiration for the next MFF. But again, the cohesion policy requires member states to act on it. So I think it's not, let's say, a done deal that these investments will flow. There's much more work to be done there, and we at least continue to see the need for a dedicated EU funding framework in the next long-term EU budget. And then the third bottleneck, coming to what you were referring to earlier, is indeed digital skills. I mean, we are, as I explained, a technology company. So evangelizing about technology is something we do a lot. However, we also always say that technology is only one part of the equation. And the other two parts are people and process. If you don't have the people and you don't have the process, you will not be able to implement the technology in a way that leads to good outcomes. So here we need to, I think, skill up, to have efforts to skill up across the sector. We also need to attract young people to the water sector. I think young people today are craving for purpose. And I think the water sector, showing them how exciting the water sector can be in terms of technology, would do wonders to get people to join the sector. And from that perspective, something that I haven't seen yet mentioned a lot in articles about the water resilience strategy is that it announces a water academy. And I think this is an excellent initiative that we, and I'm sure many others in this space, would be happy to contribute to, also from the perspective of digitalization. And finally, digital skills. I think it would also be very useful to have better knowledge exchange and capacity building between the member states. Often what we see is that the best applications of digital technology in the water space are in relatively small projects. And the reason for that is that these can move faster. And often it's harder to implement a digital strategy across very large, let's say, projects or whatever we're thinking about. So getting that knowledge that is collected in smaller projects and scaling that knowledge up, I think, is another great opportunity to try and make digitalization more pervasive in the sector.
Yeah, and any comment on the focus of the education? Because what I notice is usually, and we also had this in the preparatory process for the water resilience strategy, where through our special advisor for our expert group on human resources and skills, we had a number of exchanges with the cabinet, of course, of Roswell and Minsato. That, of course, when we usually see this dialogue on skills, usually we end up in a discussion which is very much about academic education. But I think we need to also boil it down to, I would say, the skills that people need to have who are working on it with in their daily life, with the boots on the ground, basically, and also their managers, because we also need to make sure that the managers keep, I would say, um, up to date with the evolving skills. Take, for example, AI, all the opportunity that AI offers. Do we have enough understanding of the potential of the tools that are out there? I think these things are also key to be included.
Absolutely. I have nothing to add. I completely agree with what you just said, Dirk.
Good. Okay, good. Then we move on. And Nick, I'm coming back to you because I know in your previous life you had quite of an experience with standardization. Yeah, so which I think can also be a very important driver for I would say innovation for progress. So now until now, this strategy does not place much emphasis on standardization. And of course, giving your I already refer to it your own technical expertise, but also Hydroloop's experience across markets. Do you see an opportunity where a stronger EU approach to standardization, particularly for decentralized reuse technologies, of course, could complement the strategy and facilitate scale up?
Yes, thank you, Dirk. Just coming back to the boots on the ground issue before, I started my life at a plumbing firm, and the value of exactly boots on the ground plumbers who don't work with AI but know how to actually lay pipes and connect them properly is so great and so undervalued. So I just want to emphasize that I wholeheartedly agree with getting young people excited about actually a trade. So learn a trade, and you can always fall back on that. So that it is very, very important. But coming back to the standardization, still very active in that, both in the Dutch standardization, but also the European standardization, because we have a very good framework organized by the SIN of a European standardization system. And I see standardization, although not mentioned very much in the resilience strategy, as a tool. So it's more a tool that can be used to implement the strategy set out in the water resilience strategy. And believe it or not, usually not the case, but standardization currently is actually ahead of the curve. So there is European standards, namely the 16941 series, who look after use of rainwater, reuse of grey water, and currently in development is standardization testing parameters for those systems that can be used to implement the strategy. So the framework of standards is there. We've got the EN 806 who are lagging a little bit behind because the industry historically is quite conservative. So they are, this is the, in the Netherlands, we've got a great saying about this. It is the Wet van de remmende voorsprong, which is the law of the handicap of a head start, or the first mover disadvantage. Because in Europe, we have created such a robust system, fully integrated in many households within the European Union. Now we are faced with climate change, a reduction of the amount of water that we actually can use, that we are trying to hold on to the system that we have, but we can't sustain that in the long run anymore. So we have to have that water resilient strategy or changing of system. Where you see as other parts of the world where we are also active, we focus on the more arid areas in the world, namely Australia, Middle East, Northern Central America. You see that they are quicker to adopt newer systems because their current system is not set out as tightly knit as we have in the European Union, so they are quicker to adapt. So using standardization is important to implement the strategy laid out in the water resilience strategy.
So would you support, because I mean, I think you're engaged already, as you already said at the Dutch level, at standardization linked to, of course, also to the European standardization. Would you see a way to engage in an activity that through standardization supports the implementation of something rather complex, I think, as the water resilience strategy?
Yes, I would. But maybe it would be a better approach for the water resilience strategy to target certain standards to enable people to implement it. So as I said, it's more, I see standardization as and then harmonized standard that will be used EU-wide as a tool for the water resilience strategy implementation. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
As in a tiering
No.
level. Yeah.
No. I see your point. Very good, very good. Well, let's. I think I see already some movements there, so I think we'll be seeing something more of that in the upcoming months. Then Felix, back to you. Now the strategy really highlights nutrient pollution as a key challenge. Yeah. Yet at the same time, uh, nutrient recovery technologies are still underused. Now, what are the main technical and market barriers that you observe to address that issue?
Well, you're absolutely right. There is a huge focus on this gap. We have nutrient recovery, and when we talk about the recoveries in the wastewater, the biggest elements that come out, or products potentially speaking, it's phosphorus and nitrogen. And as we mentioned before, it is essentially seen as being part of the process to achieve circularity and resilience. And yet the uptake is limited. I mentioned earlier on, I mean, we import for roughly 4 billion euros phosphorus from other countries. Now, if I go back here on the uptake, and we have to consider something on this recovery challenge. It's a breakdown of the main technical and the market barriers. Let me go back to the market. We have about 75,000 wastewater treatment plants in Europe, but 50,000 are less than 5,000 population equivalent. So then we start looking at it, where can we do something and where can we recover something? Does it make sense? So let's go at the technical barriers. Number one, process complexity and variability. That's one part. What does this mean? We have wastewater composition that varies from region to region and season to season. So cannot really standardize this. We have to look at it individually. And then many technologies require a tight process control, pre-treatment or specific pH temperature conditions. So that needs to be looked at. Number two, scale and integration issues. Most nutrient recovery system we have seen and are familiar with, they stand out because they're of a medium or larger size. So you can already see it does make sense from that you have a certain dimension. And so that limits obviously the adoption small and decentralized plants. And of course, retrofitting is obviously an alternative, but could be technically complex. Each installation is different. Number three, low efficiency for nitrogen, for instance. Compared to phosphorus, nitrogen recovery is still less mature, and it has not such a commercial interest. In other words, financially, it's not so strong. And you can see also technologies like ammonia stripping or ion exchange are quite energy intensive on the other side. So you have a great idea, but then obviously the energy cost or the financials won't make it. And number four, I would say it's the contaminants in recovery to products. You have to look at the concerns we have now over heavy metals that appear, more microplastics that appear, and that could create obviously an impact on the existing technology that requires some adaptation. So When you look at, as you mentioned, market and regulatory barriers, it's the lack of market demand. Farmers and fertilizer companies prefer the conventional standardized products, so that needs to be changed. The attitude needs to change. But obviously, as I said, we're spending so much money importing phosphor, so why don't we get it out of it? So this is the difficult part here, how we can scale this. It's a fragmented regulation in the EU. We should not forget that fertilizing still has the regional differences. Number three, it's a weak economical incentive, high capital costs and low operating margins. That's something, when you look always at the fertilizer price, it's an indication. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And then the lack of awareness or skills for utilities and municipalities to get involved in this. So I think for the EU, we truly need to implement this in the Green Deal, into the circular economy as a solution, as an action plan. And that will give us a closed loop on nutrition. Obviously, to finalize, I think, or to summarize it, would mean technology demonstration and scale up funding. That's one condition. You need to have that. We need clear regulatory pathways and quality standards, because phosphorus can have different standards. Market development support, I think a kind of a green procurement or labeling could help to, invest in this process here rather than importing the product, which anyway costs money, by the way. And integration of recovery is certainly in permitting and discharge rules is one aspect we should not lose sight of. So this is, I think, in my summary and humble way of thinking, the best approach in today's world.
And then I want to zoom into a little bit the legislative barriers, the regulatory barriers, because we've been speaking about phosphorus.
Yes.
And what we see also a bit, I think, in our network of Water Europe, that some companies have solutions for example, phosphorus recovery from sludge.
Yes.
But then they can't sell it in Europe.
That's
because
correct.
the source, the source is considered as waste. So
Yes.
they get very high quality phosphorus from this waste that actually is of strategic importance to us, and then they're forced to sell it somewhere in other places in the world.
Yeah. Canada is a big place where a lot of phosphor is being bought, and referring in our network, we have our Swedish colleague from Ragn-Sells. They are really very, very strong, because you have different processes to break down the phosphor. And obviously then, as you rightly say, you come back in a market where you can't sell it because of the legislation. So that needs to change urgently. I mean, look at what we decide here. I mean, we buy from Russia under, normally there's an embargo, but then the embargo doesn't apply because it is a required product, and Russia and Morocco account for 60% of the phosphor. And at the same time, some studies say, well, per population equivalent, you can have 1.5 to 1.8 grams per day. Great. So in theory, we could cover ourselves, but then there's again a regulation. So it's urgent to work and have a dialogue, as I said before, between the industry, who can provide a solution, and the institutions that are partially involved in regulations, and changes are necessary. We have to adapt to different circumstances. The Financial Times mentioned 10 days ago, we have to get ready, or Brussels might have to tell, not the capitals, but most cities from probably more than 100,000 population equivalent, to consider reducing water consumption by 10%. But at the same time, we face these initiatives where it's a vital right. We all have right to access. But as it was mentioned also by Geoff and Bernardo and Nick today, we have a number of valuables that are in that water. So water doesn't cost a lot, but then when you look at what you can all extract from water, then you can increase the value. But of course, that's what you said, and coming back to your point, we have so much to do there and have a clear conversation and make sure that that regulation is not going to end up in some horrible red tape where we're going to spend months negotiating and arguing and nothing's going to happen. That is a clear priority, obviously.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so I see time is moving quickly, and we've already moved into basically the last 10 minutes of this roundtable and of this webinar. So before I make some concluding remarks, I want to give all of my panelists still 1 or 2 minutes to briefly address some key issues they still would like to share with the audience as a reflection on the water resilience strategy, and how do you hope it will move forward. And there I will start again with Jeff making the tour, and then I will make some concluding remarks.
Just want to emphasize really where I began is that this is a much longed for strategy. I think it's very comprehensive. It's very valuable in that regard. And as I highlighted at the beginning, we need to look very carefully at the actions that are summarized at the end of the document and really see how we can contribute to those in the most meaningful way possible. So the strategy's there, it's been set, but of course, ultimately, it will depend on really getting behind it, interpreting it, dealing with so many challenges associated with water. I mean, one of the themes this afternoon has been on the value of water, the fact that where water is scarce, that value far exceeds its price. We see an inverse relationship between value and scarcity, price and scarcity across Europe and such like. So we have to be mindful of these real inherent impediments to progress with water, and to use all the latest will and technology and ambition to deal with them, and to deal with them very, very effectively to unlock the investments that are necessary. So overall, super positive about the release of the strategy, and again, let's get behind it.
Very good. Bernardo.
Yeah, from my side, also very positive. I think the one thing I would add to all the other remarks is that when it comes to water resilience and infrastructure more generally, we need to think in a more multidisciplinary way. What I mean is infrastructure ultimately is a system of systems, right? An impact on the energy grid will cascade down to water transportation, and an impact on water infrastructure will cascade to these other sectors as well. And we saw recently a spectacular example of this happening in Portugal and Spain with the blackout, where water distribution systems were heavily affected due to the power shortage. So this is an area where over time, digitalization, digital tools really can support EU goals when it comes to water resilience by bringing together different variables and extracting insights that we would otherwise not be able to get. So like Jeff said, and I think over the last 2 years, I've agreed with every single thing I've ever heard Jeff say, but a lot of work ahead. But the water resilience strategy, I think, is a great new beginning.
Okay, very good. A new beginning. That's a nice way.
Yeah.
Very good. Felix.
Yeah, I would summarize it as follows. Would like to have a circular economy plan? Let's go for it. Number 1, set clear and binding recovery targets. What can we recover there? And what are the volumes? What are the policies? And what is exactly, within that boundaries, and what is the driven targets? We need to define that. Number 2, we need to integrate a resource recovery and compliance plan. It needs to be clear what can be discharged on the wastewater side, and what are the required operators to do, what do they need to do on the resource recovery. That needs to be clear. And align the funding incentives, please align them. We cannot just oh, maybe here, let's try Horizon Europe or the LIFE or the Innovation Fund or the Cohesion Fund. That needs to be broken down. Develop financial instruments, grants, loans, guarantees. We need that. And of course, harmonize standards and certification. That needs to be done. We said it earlier on the legal side. And last but not least, I think, please, we also need to promote a cross-sector collaboration and knowledge sharing. That needs to be facilitated between the multiple stakeholders, where a platform should be enabled to connect with each other and allowing to, and Geoff Townsend said it here, on the municipality side and on the industrial side, both have to do their work, and that needs to be coordinated. Yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Very good. Thank you very much. Then Nick, you're
Yes,
the last
Felix,
person in the panel.
thank you. Felix just mentioned alignment. I agree with this. This strategy outlines is a great outline. I'm very happy with it. At the same time, I know that the water reuse regulation review is coming up in 2028. I think it's important to streamline the messages. So make sure that use this water resilience strategy as a document to streamline all the other documents that it relates to. It's a complicated subject. Even we get confused sometimes, let alone the general public or people who need to implement it. So within the water reuse regulation, the drinking water directive is written. In the drinking water directive, there's a definition of what water should be. The quality of water should be intended for the purpose. Make sure we don't use higher quality water for lower quality use. Make sure you make it fit for purpose, especially when scarcity appears. You have to make sure that the water that you use, which is very important to use because it enhances the processes that we use it for, but make sure it's fit for purpose. So try use this as a jumping board to align the different strategies and regulations to make it easier for the European Commission to implement it, for member states to accept it, and for policymakers and investors to understand it, where they can invest their money and how they get the biggest bang for their buck, which is very important for them and important to get things rolling as well. But in essence, I'm very happy with the published strategy.
Very good, very good. So then I want again a big digital applause for my panelists. Thank you very much. I think we had an excellent session despite some technological challenges that we had, but I think we've improvised quite well to address these issues. And be sure we already concluded that skills and education are important. And I know Pernille is right now following us through over LinkedIn. So I'll be working also with Pernille on the education of the digital skills present in the cabinet to prevent these glitches that we had. Although I understood that in an earlier session where she was, everything went very well. So I think yeah, there's some issues that we need to see what has been the cause. Just to conclude, we as Water Europe, I think we've been working very hard over the last 10 years, but particularly the 4 years, to achieve the 3 key priorities, which is basically getting a European vice president for water to address what we already mentioned a number of times. I would say the fragmentation of the water ecosystem. Well, we did not get a vice president, but I think we got a European commissioner on environment, water resilience, and competitive circular economy. I think that is a very great success. We have now also been fighting for a water strategy and action plan. We also got there. Now, of course, we need to make sure that it gets implemented, but we will be very eager to work with the European Commission and all the stakeholders to the benefit of Europe's society, economy, and biodiversity to make sure that strategy is implemented. And now the big fight is for our last demand, which we have not been able to realize yet, which is a water fund, which we'll be working for very hard to have that included, good financing for the water challenges in the next multi-annual financial framework. As a last point, perhaps, on our website, we have dedicated a whole section now to the water resilience strategy, where we have summarized it, explained it, and where we will be, I would say, posting our updates. I'm sharing it now, a link to that site in the chat. Please check it out and keep following it, because we will try to keep you informed of all the developments through, at least from a Water Europe perspective, through that website. With that, I would like to thank you all very much, all the speakers, Nick, Felix, Bernardo, Jeff, Magdalena, for the excellent work you've been doing, and hope to see you soon in our big water family. Thank you and bye-bye.